Hello and welcome to Procrastination Point's video Snark. If you came here because you thought that this was an audiobook, please stick around and maybe learn some reading and listening comprehension skills. I read books, discuss what went wrong and how they can possibly be fixed. I'm continuing my read through of Crewel by Gennifer Albin. Not the first video, go check out the others, links are posted below. Chapter 20. Despite the fact that the previous chapter ended with Ad finding a note from Minora, we don't actually find out what it says immediately. Oh no. First we have Ad talking about how she decided that from then on she was going to carry the digifile with her everywhere, and then trying to determine which of her suits the phone could fit into the pockets and which suits needed to be modified. And then we get to the note. The note itself is pretty standard. She wishes that she could have fought harder, but man, it was a difficult fight. There's also hints that there are other files Nora had left behind in the device, but no mention of Ad actually finding them. However, we immediately move on from this with the arrival of Cormac. He makes himself right at home sitting on her bed. I will not stop saying this until it stops being true, but this man is a pedophile. Ad said that she sat on a chair, so there's literally no reason for this man, who's probably the same age as her father, to sit on the bed. He gets straight to the point. He's looking for loyalty in a Crewel and reminds her that she ran when people came for her. My parents forced me to run, and I was scared enough to listen to them. I would like to remind everybody that Ad is a literal child. She is 16 years old. Cormac had previously told her that they kill all girls who try to run no matter what, which I find hard to believe considering how hard up that they are for girls with actual talent, especially when you stop to consider who told them to run. Even if the parents didn't say anything to the girl when the guard showed up at the door, the idea of running didn't pop into the girl's head on accident without warning. These people murder little girls and their entire families simply because armed guards show up to take them away from everything that they've ever known, to force these girls into a lifetime of slavery. And Cormac somehow wants to be the hero in this situation? Sure, buddy. Ad asks how she can prove that she's loyal, not because she is loyal, but simply to buy herself more time, which is one of those no kidding moments. Obviously, she doesn't want to be brutally murdered by these people or driven to the same end as Nora was because of the psychological torture called remapping. Cormac abruptly changes the subject and asks her why Cruelers are important. She word vomits the same kind of nonsense that Lorisel had been telling her this entire time, but he scoffs over the idea that Cruelers are more important than putting the raw materials into the wave. He continues on and says that there's no way that she understands real tragedy. Obviously, this enrages her. She thinks about how this man ordered her entire family basically murdered, but she knows that he's trying to goad her into her actions, so she doesn't show anything. You think you know loss, but before Eris and the Guild of 12, war spilled blood all over the earth. Entire generations of young men died so that other men could gain more power. I bite my tongue and stare back at him. Lorisel has already told me all of this, but to my astonishment, I realize he believes what he's saying, as though he's different from those evil men. He continues on and talks about the way things had been, the things that drove the wars on Earth, and talks about how things are different here. Underlining all of his words is the fact that the food and perfect weather is the direct result of kidnapping little girls away from their homes and forcing them to provide all of this. And is hung up over one singular word: control. This has nothing to do with making the world a better place. This is about controlling the masses. After all, you can't have wars if you do removals of people who show signs of rebellion. Jaw's backstory speaks to the lengths that they would go to in order to squash this. Entire towns completely wiped from existence. Innocent women and newborns plucked from reality. And as if he's ever had anybody removed. He says that not only were his parents removed, but also his wife. Without any further information, Ad is struck by how cruel that he sounds right now. His own wife. Somebody that he probably once made promises to love and cherish. Ad obviously wants to know more. He explains that she was physically ill in a time before medical technology had caught up to help people. She wasn't actively dying, only not productive. So, you know how back in the day men could ship their wives off to the asylum, declare her mentally incompetent, and be granted a divorce by a court, also that they could then get remarried? Yeah, that's so much better than flat out murdering them. That's the thing, Attalus. The time has come for the family unit to be promoted again in Aras, he says, switching on his politician's smile. Intentional or not, this man is so Republican-coded it physically hurts. He talks about casually murdering women and children at the same time it says garbage like this. The fact that he's a pedophile also checks out. Cormac then goes on to explain how, despite how it's mandatory that everybody be married by 18, a movement that sounds suspiciously like the 4B movement is sweeping the nation. Ad doesn't even pretend to hide her sarcasm when she asks why it is that they don't do something to stop this. This leads him back to remapping, that when they pulled out the remains of Honora's thread from the weave, it was barely hanging in there, which is a lead-in for how dangerous remapping is. That and, permanently removing yourself from the weave via forceful means. If girls stop marrying, or is forbid they live on their own, we can't protect them. This is the same sort of argument that I see men trying to make online. If men were to disappear, who would protect women? And the answer is obvious. Protect us from what? You're the thing that we need protecting from. Judging by the casual way that Ad's parents knew what was up and how half of the men in Joss Village knew what was up, something tells me that the guild has less of a control on hiding ugly truths from the population than they'd like. And much like Republicans, the guild seeks to control women by forcing them into what are undoubtedly toxic relationships, force them to have children that they don't want. Lord only knows what the working class women are forced to endure in this world too. I actually think Cormac believes what he's saying, but I've seen the effects of those stringent rules. My mother being refused more children, or our carefully segregated neighborhoods in order trying to live a lie. Was quiet desperation the price of surface happiness? As I've been saying this entire time, the women aren't people to the guild. They're necessary tools, and while I have been meaning only the spinsters, this applies also to every single woman in this world. I feel like a tapestry is such an amazing metaphor to use right now, because when you look at the front of the tapestry, it's a beautiful scene, but on the back, it's nothing but a mess of hanging threads. It doesn't matter that women are so unhappy that they're willing to remove themselves from the weave by any means necessary. What only matters is how things appear to the public. Cormac then goes on to say that he needs to set an example to the public, that getting married is desirable and wanted. Ad obviously protests this, since they keep telling everybody that spinsters just remain pure, unkissed virgins, and goes one step further to say that the guild themselves spread the lie that being physically intimate with a man impacts his spinster's abilities. Cormac then looks her in the eye and tells her that she knows that it's not true, and then has the freaking audacity to try and slut-shame her. Now, I don't know if there was supposed to be a heavily implied moment in one of those time bubbles with Jost. You know what I mean. But from Cormac's perspective, the only thing that Ad is reported to have done was have a drunken kiss with Eric. If their standards are so high that he's slut-shaming her for that, then they need to remove every single man from the Coventry. No. Once again, forcing the spinsters to remain unmarried is all about control, and I'm once again circling back to these Republican standards. They need the spinsters to work, but we can't have a world where women are powerful, employed, happy, but also that they have families. Because women need to forever be barefoot and pregnant, after all. I hate it here. However, Ad is confused about this conversation, since he's not going to allow the spinsters to get married to set an example. Then why is he telling her all of this? He says that there's one person that the public will allow to get married, the Crewel, which is obviously Ad, since Lorcil is probably a few days from her own death, if I had to guess. Ad clings to the idea that she's not only going to be able but permitted to marry Jost. However, Cormac is quick to burst her bubble and says that they've already chosen who her husband will be. Well, Cormac has chosen, and it's him. He wants to marry Ad. My jaw remains firmly in place. I can't even pretend to be surprised about this, seeing as how he spent this entire book trying to get into Ad's pants. I am once again asking Ad why is that she can't slash the tapestry and simply do away with terrible people like this pedophile. Our biogenetic team had created a patch that will ensure I can procreate much the same as any young father. Male fertility is not the problem here. The problem is that you are literally climbing on top of a girl who is young enough to be your own daughter. And if I refuse, I ask, barely containing the hysteria I feel building in my chest. We remap you, he says with an edge to his voice, and then you marry me. I love how she doesn't even have a choice. Forget slashing the tapestry, Ad. Murder the guy right now. I'd start with the Lorena Bobbitt special to really mess with him. Obviously, she chooses to go along with him, but he openly brags about how her choice doesn't even matter, that he's probably going to remap her anyway. Ad runs off and goes to cry in the stairwell where there aren't any cameras, because, yeah. Chapter 21. Ad goes up to the Crewel workshop where she commands the screens to show her the dining hall downstairs. She watches as the younger girls talk happily amongst themselves and as Joss serves them. All around, eyes fix on me. I feel exposed, but then realize I'm standing in the spot where the main dish will be placed, a large hammer, turkey, or duck. One by one, the spinsters seated near this spot begin reaching out towards me, their hands returning with knives and forks full of steaming white meat. I'm being eaten alive. This is a choice. Is this supposed to be a metaphor or something? Then Ad tries to ask for the offices, but the screens show her a random office outside the comment tree. When asking for offices inside the comment tree pulls up nothing, she then looks to the files that Nora had given her. One of them is a map, so she's able to call by exact name the room that she's looking for. The screen shows it's basically a social security number for every citizen. Date of birth, sector, metro, mother's initials, child's initials, which is fine so long as you never actually leave the sector and metro that you were born into. And then pulls down the loom but hesitates before she begins to work, mainly because she's not quite sure what will happen if she starts to work the loom on the comment tree itself. But then she gets to work and begins to feed, I think it's one of those time bubbles into the fabric. I'm not quite sure exactly what's happening, but she uses this little cheat in order to teleport herself into the file storage area. And there she pulls out a random file to study it. A thread is inside of it, the remains of somebody who is ripped. However, in the file, the status of the person is being listed as active despite having been ripped 2 years earlier. Curious, sir. However, she goes to another section where she finds what she's looking for, children who have been removed and rewoven into new families. Obviously, she's looking for Amy. But as she keeps searching, she finds somebody else unexpected, another child that she knows, kind of, who is removed and rewoven, Joss's daughter. To the surprise of literally not one single person, Cormac is the one listed as requesting this removal. Anna takes a card, telling herself that she's going to photograph it like she did the others, in order to study it at her leisure later, and then she keeps looking for her sister's file. Before she can find it, the door opens. Ad is forced to flee back through the rift that she'd created before she's caught. Laura still is there, angry that Ad would have done this, or at least angry that she has to clean up Ad's mess. She reminds Ad that in doing this, Ad is only drawing further attention to herself and putting Amy in further danger, that at some point Cormac is simply going to remove Amy. But more importantly, Laura still wants to know how it is that Ad was able to find the file room on her own. She promises that she's not going to tell anybody about this, but reminds Ad that having free will has consequences. But you're playing a dangerous game. My mouth is dry. I'm not playing a game, I say. People's lives are literally on the line here. This man has complete and utter unchecked power, and he's using it to hurt people. Once again, Laura still is not half of the hero that I think she needs to be in this story. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. New videos are up every Monday, but stick around because I sometimes drop random videos on other days too. Just as a reminder, even if you can't financially support me, there are other ways to help me out. The first is watching this video as well as all my other videos. It's also important to like and subscribe. Finally, you can share this video with all of your friends so that they can help as well. If you're already caught up with all of my videos, you can go to Tumblr for my main book. Snark's always free and updated every morning. Newly added to Patreon is to become a member without paying. You'll get access to the same things on Tumblr, but on Patreon. Supporters can have access to so many more books starting at $1 a month. Also, Note is a 1-week free Patreon trial, so be sure to check that out. Special thanks to Dawn and Phoebe for supporting me on Patreon already. If you want to hear your name in my video next week, either support me on Patreon or make a one-time donation. Do you like my Snark so much that you want me to snark your writing? I do that too. For just $6 per chapter, I will tell you how awful that your writing is, but not to worry if you feel like you couldn't take the criticism. I also offer regular book editing as well, just $10 per chapter. You can contact me on any of my social media platforms if you have further questions. If you want to read some of the things that I've written, you can purchase my works on Amazon. I have a slew of spicy short stories and 2 full-length novels. I also frequently run flash sales on my stories, and if you don't follow me on any social media, you might want to do so just so you can know when I might be offering things for free. Links for everything will be posted below. See you next week, guys!